Hello everybody, I hope you're well. After a request from a couple of people, even though I can't stand this case, it's awful to me and I have physical reactions to it, I'm going to look at it anyway. It is Chris Watts' family annihilator. I was going to say something far worse then. Chris Watts is a family annihilator. He annihilated his wife, his children, his unborn child. He is a despicable human being. I touched on him in the last video on his natal chart. But what I want to show is the event chart, because that is actually what shows us, combined with a few natal things. I'll swap it around so you can see. But the event chart for this specific chart is for when Shannon came home that evening at 1:48 a.m. So it shows us what happened when she walked in the door. It's his reaction to her as she's walking in. How long did it take? What happened? Etc. etc. This chart here tells us this. His natal chart doesn't tell us really very much about that. We can put it in some places and make some things more relatable and more understandable, but this event chart will show us everything we need to know. So firstly, where I always look is the ascendant, this area here where the victim is, or in this instance victims, and it just happens to be Gemini, which represents more than one person, so it shows us all of the people involved. Aside from the first house though, when children are involved as well, we look to, well, the fourth house. The fifth house is our firstborn child usually. The fourth house, there's a few areas to look with children as well, but so we'll focus on Shannon coming home. So she is ruled by Mercury, because Mercury rules Gemini here. So Shannon is Mercury in this instance. Now Mercury is in the third house, and that's interesting because she's literally just gotten home. Now the sun here is also, we always look at the sun as a representative of a person because it's a sole purpose, it's what's moving, what's moving us along, and it's always there, we're revolving around it, and it's important to look at. So the sun is right near the front door, so that shows us that she was in, walking in the house. But then Mercury, which represents her specifically, is at 13 degrees of Leo, and it is stationary. So it is not retrograde and it's not direct. It is standing still. And it's almost as if she's walked in the house, and then the third house being communications, and also being things like arguments and discussions about whatever. She's walked in the door and bam, copped it from him. It being in Leo, now Mercury in Leo doesn't always mean this, but in this instance, because Mercury is in Leo in the third house, he was shouting at her like a Leo can. Now he's not a Leo, he's a Taurus, but he was shouting at her, and he was ready to go immediately as she got home. So she was sort of stuck stationary, like probably walked in the door and went, whoa, blindsided by whatever was going on. Now, not only that, Uranus was also stationary as well on this day. Now that doesn't happen very often. So Uranus was, just wandering. There was no definitive direction, and it's unusual enough as it is. So unexpected events were the pinnacle of that day. There was a stationary Uranus there too. So it is interesting just to note that we have two stationaries. They're forming a very loose aspect to each other, but that's irrelevant. Anyway, so moving forward, so we have Shannon just walked in the door and she got shouted at. Pretty much, I can assume immediately, as I said, with the sun being here at the door as well. This is the door to the house. those of you that watch my videos will know probably roughly at least the areas I go to where to look for somebody. So over here, the 7th house is a perpetrator or the open enemy, the enemy of the person in question, Shannon's enemy. And that is at 25 degrees Sagittarius. Now, I have to say that I see this very often, 25 degrees of Gemini and Sagittarius on the ascendant and the descendant when somebody gets murdered. I don't know why it pops up so often in event charts, but it does. And if you go through all my videos, you'll notice them. If you've been in my group, you'll notice them. I've even done an article showing how many of them actually are there, so I might pop a link to that below. Anyway, so the ruler of Sagittarius is Jupiter, and Jupiter in this chart is sitting here in Scorpio in the 5th house, but just conjunct the 6th house of health and daily activities and routines and etc. But it's not, it's in the 5th house. Now, this, for one, leads me to believe that he was possibly drinking or had taken some type of drugs, and that's no excuse, but when we see a ruler in the 5th house, that's often, it's, you know, we have to think about that. But what we look for always is a connection between the two people. So the two rulers are Jupiter, him, and Mercury, Shannon. Mercury is at 13, Leo. Jupiter is at 14, Scorpio. When the degrees are close like that, we know they're in aspect. And you'll see these really big red lines here. They are squaring each other. Now, they're squaring each other from the 3rd house of communication to the 5th house of him having maybe a couple of drinks, getting a little bit of Dutch courage, moving towards the 6th house of health, where someone's health isn't going to hold up from this. Now, not only that, I can see here that Neptune is at 15 degrees of Pisces, so it's in orb very closely with these two. It's trining Jupiter. I really think that he was not in his normal state of mind at the time when it happened, whether it was just having some drinks or not. I'm not sure, actually. I don't know whether he said if he was or not, but it appears as though he wasn't in his right frame of mind. He wouldn't have, maybe he wouldn't have acted like this and done this if he was in his normal state of mind. I don't know. It's hard to tell with family annihilators because it's a thing that's coming about more and more, and it's getting, you know, hard to understand how people could just do such a thing. Anyway, I digress. So the next thing I like to look at is the 8th house, and the 8th house is the 8th house of death in situations like this, and we have Capricorn there. Capricorn is death all over. It's Father Time. It's when time runs out. It's time to go when Father Time is there. Pluto's in there, and Mars is in there. Now, they're very angry planets, malefic planets, especially in Capricorn. They don't play very nicely. And Mars is at 29 degrees of Capricorn, and it's retrograde. So it's not itself. I mean, it's exalted there, so Mars it likes to be in Capricorn, but it likes to get angrier. It can get angrier, and it did. He was at the epitome of anger by this time. As soon as she walked in the door, he was furious, because that 29 degrees shows the very edge, the precipice of his being able to control himself. And he couldn't control himself, obviously. So he was absolutely furious as the minute she got home already. Okay, so another thing that I can see is that because Chris Watts's ruler Jupiter here is in the 5th house, that's the children, as I mentioned before. He was already thinking as well about killing the children. This is obviously premeditated for a little while, because this shows me that he was, well, sitting in the children's bedroom even is a possibility when she came in. Yeah, I hate this case. I hate it so much. It's really actually quite hard to do it. So, pause a second. Okay, sorry about that. So the moon is the co-ruler of Shannon as well, and the moon is at 17 degrees of Virgo in the 4th house, in the home, but also at the end of the matter. Now, I see the children in there. It's the whole family. It's her and the children, and what I saw initially when I found out what happened to them was awful, because it shows very clearly there's an opposition here between the moon and Neptune. As I said before, Neptune is trining Watts's ruler, but the opposition between these two shows me him putting them in oil, because Neptune represents oil, and their death would have just been really horrible. And I can't imagine anybody killing children in a way like that, let alone their own father. To look into everything, the family dynamics and the full responsibility of this type of thing and family annihilators, you really need to look into the astrology charts of every person, the children, the relationship between them and him, Shannon, the relationship between her and him. How could he actually do this to those children? No chart will tell us that. We'll see a series of lineups and a series of things that will show us that that is what happened. But who in their right mind puts a little baby in a hole and drowns them in oil? It's insane. So it shows us clearly with these tight aspects, 15, 14, 13, they're the tightest aspects, in fact, in the whole chart. And they're the main players. She was killed immediately because he had planned it already, but anything she would have said wouldn't have made any difference because he'd already planned it. And I think he'd already planned on putting the children in the oil well as well. I don't think it came up with that out of the blue. Now, Saturn being the bodies of people, not our souls, just our shells, just our body, in the 7th house there, is oddly also can show sort of that he buried them where he wanted to. It was up to him. He didn't even have the niceness about him at all, or conscience or guilt or anything, to bury them in a place that was not an oil well, so he buried them where he wanted to, which is that 7th house. It was all about him. He wanted what he wanted, and that was it. And he wanted to have a new life, and he didn't want a baby, and it was as simple as that to him. It was just easy to get angry enough to kill them. Unfortunately, Mars, right at that point in time, being at 29 degrees of Capricorn, loosely conjunct, but applying to a conjunction to Pluto in the 8th house, he would have just been so ropeable that there would have been no stopping him, and he would have strangled them. I absolutely know for a fact that he would have used his hands. No matter what else happened, he also strangled her. I would say he strangled her immediately. He would have ran at her and started strangling her. It's very, very obvious to me. Disgusting man. Okay, so let's have a quick look at that asshole's chart. Here's his natal chart here. Well, it's 6:15 a.m. chart. 16th of May, 85. He's not even that old. I'm 11 years older than that guy. He's such a dickhead. Not that that makes any difference. So is there anything that stands out here really that combines with the other chart? The one thing that I did see is his Mars here, because Mars is always anger. It's anger, not always angry, but it represents our level of anger. How angry can we actually get? Well, his level is 13. No, that's not true. I'm joking. He's at 13 degrees of Gemini. His anger goes two ways. You know, like people assume and say a Gemini is two-faced. They're actually not always like that at all. But there is two sides to Gemini. There's the one that you see and the one that you don't see. So that's his anger. And not coincidentally, but Gemini was the ascendant at 25 degrees as well, remember? But this is Taurus. Is the ascendant of the event. So if I go back here, we can see Gemini there. So his Mars was just... His Mars was just in the 12th house here, which is in a hidden area. So as she was coming home, the rage was building up in him. He's got two schools of thought here, Gemini. You know, like, which way am I going to go? Am I going to kill it tonight? Is it going to be tonight? You know, she wouldn't have said anything or done anything that would have instigated even an argument. He would have been looking for the argument. Now, have a look at this. I joked before about 13 levels of anger, but look at Shannon's ruler. It's at 13 degrees of Leo. Let's get back to this arseholes again. His Mars is at 13 degrees. It's Gemini, it's not Leo, but that means that his own Mars is in aspect, if I can get it, to Shannon at that time. So his anger, if you can, we could draw a pretend, don't need to pretend, I can actually do it. His Mars, maybe I can't. Okay, maybe I've got no colour on. Okay, let's pretend I can draw and use this program. Oh my goodness. Okay, that's his Mars there at 1, 3. It's got an arrow. I don't know why that's doing that. Okay, so his Mars is at 13 degrees of Gemini in his natal chart, and that'll be aspecting that there. So there'd be a line. If it was in this chart, there'd be a line from there to there. So there's the anger towards her the minute that she walked in the door. That was an absolute bullseye, wasn't it? Let's get rid of that. But the general rule of thumb there is that we look at a couple of planets and see if they're exactly conjunct. I'm not looking for anything that's very wide, and you know, I want something that's really specific. Now, what's really specific to me is, I'll open that up, is that his Mars is in Gemini and the ascendant was in Gemini. So it was just a perfect time for him to snap when she walked in the door. He was ready to do it, and it was a good time for him. Now, just lastly, last little look. So here's his natal chart with the transits on the outside. So his natal Saturn was in the 8th house at the time of death, so he was prepared to kill. His Jupiter, which was him in the other chart, was coming up to his own natal Saturn. There's a couple of things around the end of the matter, the ascendant. It led him to do this, but he had planned to do this before. I have no doubts about it. He did not plan on staying with Shannon. He didn't want the children. Natal chart, Look at all that stuff in the 12th house there. Oh, poor thing, looks like he might end up dying in prison. No, it's not as easy as to say that. But he does have Pluto opposing Mercury. So his health is going to decline in jail, that's for sure. He's not the sort of person that can tolerate living in jail, put it that way. And also, he's got an Aries Aries Venus and an Aries moon. So he's probably a bit of I imagine he thinks he's pretty funny, or thinks he can get away with anything in prison. But undoubtedly, someone will beat the living shit out of him, because he is a pompous asshole. And if this chart is exactly correct, which I think it is, having Algol on the ascendant, maybe he'll, catch fire or something horrific like that. That's terrible, I know. I shouldn't say that about any human, but this man in particular is just disgraceful. So there is my reading on Chris Watts, the family annihilator. I've actually got more cases to bring up of family annihilators because, as I said before, for some reason there seems to be more and more of them popping out of the woodwork. It seems to be okay to just kill your family to get them out of the way if you want to have an affair or start a new life. So serial killers, they're by the wayside. I don't know if anybody's noticed that. It's too hard to be a serial killer these days. Science has advanced way too far. Instead, we're seeing kills like this, family annihilations, people that know that they're going to get caught, or people like Chris Watts who think they can trick the media and everybody who's watching and get away with it. Certainly didn't fool me. I could see the marks on his neck in the interview. And I'll put a couple of pictures up here, actually. You can clearly see that he's been attacked. I hope she got some good shots in. Anyway, God bless her and the little children. Thanks, guys, for watching. This guy sucks. Catch us all later. Bye.